Hari Om. So here we are continuing with chapter 4 of the Bhagavad Gita, the Yoga of Knowledge. This time we are going to be discussing verses 22 to 33. Now it is well known to most of us that when we act with egocentric desires, we create vasanas. To put it in another way, the ego is created when, in an assumed delusion, we identify with the body, mind and intellect. Now a delusion is defined as a false belief that persists even after the falsity has been shown and proved beyond any doubt. So what is this delusion that we are talking about that we have? We have been taught that the body, mind and intellect are objects of our awareness, and therefore we are separate from those three equipments, the body, mind and intellect. And it had been proved time and time again in many of these texts that have been taken so far that we are not the body, mind and intellect. And we understood. We agreed with the logic and reasoning. And yet we continue with our belief that we are this body, mind and intellect and go on with our lives based on that assumption. That is the delusion. Now this ego that had been so created by us is sustained by two factors: hopes for the future and satisfaction with the present possessions, whatever that we have today. Therefore, it has been recommended that if we detach ourselves from this identification with the BMI, the body, mind and intellect, meaning that we have full control over the body, mind and intellect, and have no expectations from the future, because the future is an unknown entity and we have no hopes that this future will bring any more happiness to us than what we already have, and give up all the possessions that we have now, then we would not incur any consequences, meaning our actions in this world would not bring about any miseries or reactions. Now, when you read the Gita, it says, Lord Krishna says, when you act with no hope and give up all your possessions, it's very easy to misinterpret that and say, the Gita is very illogical. How can you live without hope? And how can you give up all your possessions and yet keep on living? See, that is one of the dangers of studying the scriptures by ourselves without the guidance of a guru. Now, it has been very logically explained that when you say hopes, to give up hopes, meaning that you do not have any expectations from the future, because expectations are always and hopes are always from the future. The future is an unknown entity. By having expectations and hope, you are only dissipating your vital energy which is required for your present actions. And therefore it is illogical to keep on expecting and imagining the fruits of your actions which are in the future. Now, giving up your possessions, meaning, Gurudev gives a beautiful example. This boy is about to enter the college now. Now, all through his teenage years, he had been collecting a lot of toy cars, the Matchbox cars, and he has a huge collection. So on the day before he was going to the college, he takes that box full of cars that he has collected, calls his younger brother and gives it to him and says, "You can have it." The younger brother could not believe it. He asked, "Well, are you giving it to me just for the time being?" He says, "No, you can have it for good." Now the younger brother really is amazed that this precious collection of toys has been given to him for free. So he goes and tells his neighborhood friends, "You know, my brother has gone a little crazy. He has given me all these toys for free." Now why? Because that boy who is now getting into college had moved on to a different realm. And for him, these toys are redundant. It is true that he did enjoy those cars. He did collect them and he was fascinated by them. But now all that fascination has ended because he had moved on to a higher realm. In the same way, the realized masters, after living in this world and having realized, for them, the material things in this world are redundant. They do not hold any happiness for him. The other example or the other fact that the Gita says is that in our sleep, if someone hits his wife with his elbow and gives her a black eye, he is not charged with domestic violence. Why? Because he was not present at that time in his sleep. When I say he was not present, meaning his ego was not present at that time. Why? Because his mind was absent. So technically, he was not present at that time when he elbowed his wife and gave her the black eye. It is obvious then from that point that it is our identification with the ego that causes all the miseries and consequences that we suffer in our lives. In a realized master, once he realizes, it doesn't mean that he dies at that point, that he has merged with the Lord, because he still lives on in this world even after realization. So how is he acting? It is only his body that is acting, and it is like the flute. The flute has no music in it. But if there is a flute player at the end of the flute, he blows into the flute and plays with the different holes in the flute and brings about beautiful music. The realized master is also like the flute. He allows the Lord to play through him. His body is used by the Lord to express the divine thoughts and plans into action. And that's how the realized master acts. The Lord working through him. The realized master's mind and intellect have been transcended. For such a master, the pairs of opposites, meaning heat and cold, joy and sorrow, success and failure, do not affect him. Because he would be taking up various projects while he is living in this world. It is immaterial to him whether he succeeds or those plans don't work out. Either way, it had been done for the Lord and the Lord was acting through him. If it doesn't succeed, it is not a failure on his part. If it succeeds, he doesn't take credit for himself. That's how the realized master acts, because they are all interpretations of the mind which the realized master has transcended. He functions in the yajna spirit, meaning in a self-dedicated activities performed in the spirit of service to others. Now the next stanza is a very important stanza, and to give it a preview, I want to give you this beautiful example given by our Gurudev. He said, it was Ganesh Chaturthi, and I and my wife wanted to celebrate the Ganesh Chaturthi in a grand fashion. So that morning, everything in my puja room has been nicely arranged. There was a big silver Ganesh idol, and me and my wife had taken a shower and put on new clothes. She was wearing Kanjivaram sari, meaning it's an expensive sari, and I was wearing my silk dhoti, and there I was seated in front of Lord Ganesha, all silver vessels containing all the different puja dravya there, and then there was a big bowl of flowers, beautiful flowers, all colors and all kinds there. And I was chanting, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Vigneshwaraya Namaha, and so on, all those 1008 names of Ganesha. And while I am doing the oblations, my wife was helping me with all the other things that needs for my puja. Just like how a nurse would hand over the necessary instruments to a surgeon while he is operating, she was giving me all the stuff that I was pouring on to the Lord. All the 1008 names were finished, and now the last part of the puja, which is the arati. So I take the plate, put the camphor on it, lighted it, and then I'm doing the arati. It was at that time that my wife noticed that there was an agarbatti that was not burning right. So she stepped in front of me and lit that agarbatti. While she was doing that, she didn't notice that there was a lamp right next to me. That lamp lit a sari up, and the sari was burning. And she was screaming and yelling, and I was trying to put the fire out, trying to roll her and to get the fire under control. And in the process, my dhoti also caught fire. And I was screaming and she was screaming, and it was all a big mess. All the puja, everything was stopped right there, and we were frantically doing various things to stop the fire. It was at that time that I woke up and realized that it was a dream. Now, tell me, who was I and my wife? It was your mind. That was you and your wife. Correct. Who was Lord Ganesha? It was my mind again. Who were all those flowers and all those silver katoris that were there? It was all my mind. How about that fire that was burning, into which I was pouring the oblations? Again, it was my mind. Now, it was all in my mind. My waking mind was the one that caused all that, and it was there. But Did I know when I was dreaming that it was all my mind? No. I realized that only when I woke up from my dream. As long as I was in my dream, I did not know. I imagined that all those things, all those different things were all different. I never realized that it was all my mind. But when I woke up, I realized that it was all my imagination. Once I wake up, I don't need to go and check whether my wife is all right, whether she got burned, or should I need to take her to the hospital. There was no necessity, because I have already realized that it was all my dream mind that had all that. Now in the same way, in our lives, this is the famous stanza, Brahmarpanam Brahma Havihi Brahma Agnyo Brahmana Hudam Brahmaiva Tena Gantavyam Brahma Karma Samadhina. Meaning, now this is a stanza that is chanted before meals in most Hindu traditions. The obvious meaning is evident here. Everything is Brahman. The one who is chanting is Brahman himself. The oblations that I am putting on to the fire is Brahman himself. So my Brahmarpanam, that's what I am offering. Brahma Havihi, the clarified butter, all those things that I am putting into the fire are all Brahman himself. Brahma Agnav, the fire itself is Brahman himself. Brahmana Hudam, who am I giving that to? To Brahman himself. And whoever who can see Brahman in everything around him here, that everything in this world is nothing but Brahman himself, that person will come to realize Brahman himself. That's what this verse means. Brahman is the oblation, Brahman is the ghee, etc. Brahman is the fire. Brahman will be reached by him who sees Brahman in all actions. Now all actions are yagnas if they are done in the right spirit. It has been said that when you act with selfless motives, then you do not accumulate any negative vasanas. Now that is all intellectual understanding, an intellectual concept. But here Lord Krishna says that intellectual understanding alone is not enough. It has to be accompanied by the emotion of devotion. Intellectual ideas have to be accompanied by emotion of devotion, meaning there has to be some kind of a yagna, meaning that a ritual. A yagna in those days meant a ritual where you pour oblations into the fire and offer these sacrifices into the fire. Now, Lord Krishna says, in the same way, this concept of yagna, meaning sacrificing your oblations into the fire, you can do it mentally in your life, in every action of ours. You can do that as a yagna in your life. And he has listed about 12 yagnas, recommended 12 yagnas for us to practice. And I'll be going through all those yagnas because they are very useful exercises for us to go through. The number one yagna is the Deva Yagna. Deva Yagna is, Devas, as you know, are the mighty phenomenal forces. There are yogis who invoke the power of the phenomenal forces and sacrifice that at the feet of the Lord. Our Gurudev says, from a subjective standpoint, subjective meaning each one of us, the most powerful devas within us are our 5 sense organs of perception. The eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin. Now, these 5 organs of perception are powerful devas because they bring us this entire world into us through these 5 senses of perception. So therefore, these 5 senses are considered devas, and they are used as sacrifice at the feet of the Lord. Invoking the mighty devas as sacrifice. Subjectively, the greatest devas are the 5 sense organs of perception. The sense objects. Now, these sense organs come into contact with sense objects. My eyes, which is a sense organ, comes into contact with a sense object, a beautiful flower. That sense object, when it comes in contact with my sense organ, it gives enjoyment to me. But when I realize that my sense organs cannot function without the presence of Brahman, because when Brahman is not in me, which means when I am dead, I have the sense organs, but it has no ability to contact the sense object. So it is the presence of the Lord that helps me perceive the sense object. So if one can imagine, when the sense organs come into contact with sense object, you realize the fact that in a way that these sense objects are actually paying their obeisance or tribute to the sense organs. That kind of relieves me from that attachment that I would get by enjoying that particular object. And this is how realized masters are able to function in this world without getting attached to these sense objects. The other yajna that is recommended is Brahma yajna, meaning there are others who they practice the yajna offering the self as a sacrifice by the self in the fire of Brahman. They offer the sacrifices as the sacrifice itself to the Lord. They perform these yajnas, and these yajnas are performed again. They have done a good deed by performing the yajna, but that yajna itself is being sacrificed at the feet of the Lord. To dedicate their sense life in the service of others. Shankara says, how do you sacrifice at the feet of the Lord? Shankara says, to know the conditioned self. That is, the ego is the conditioned self. The self is Brahman himself or Atman. But when it is conditioned by our mind and intellect, it becomes the ego. So when the conditioned self is identical with the unconditioned self, which is the Atman, that is to sacrifice the self in Brahman. Now the third yajna is some control sense organs in the fire of self-restraint. There are others who practice this yajna by controlling their sense organs, meaning there are temptations in every one of us. Our sense organs are constantly demanding to contact sense objects. But exercising self-restraint, there are people who practice that self-restraint and do not want to give in to the demands of the body, which is the sense organs. That's called sama, where you control your sense organs. Again, that is done in a sacrifice to the Lord. There are others who control the mind from leaking out. Now, there are people who control the senses in that way, but then somebody may naturally be able to control his senses, but he may not be able to control his mind. So while he is seated quietly, our Gurudev gives a beautiful example of this orange-clad man who is seated in the park under a tree in meditation. And everybody is full of reverence to this man because he is meditating all the time under the tree in the park. But what is he doing? He has controlled all his sense organs and he is in that Padmasana position with his eyes closed. But his mind is reveling in all the past memories of pleasurable things that he had experienced, and he is reliving that in his own mind. So he is allowing his mind to leak out into those sense pleasures that he had experienced. So some control their mind from leaking out, and that's called Dhamma. So that's the fourth way by which you practice the yajna. Then fifth, the others control their prana. Now this prana has been misinterpreted as your breathing. Actually, the Sanskrit word for breathing is swasa. Swasa and uchvasa. You take in and what you put out is uchvasa. Prana is all the activities that sustain life in you. All the activities in life that sustains life in you are called prana. Now there are 5 physiological activities that we are familiar with: prana, apana, samana, vyana and udana. These are the 5 physiological activities that are lumped together and called prana. So some control prana, others control prana, all activities that sustain life. Prana, apana, samana, vyana and udana. Prana is taking in. Prana and apana is not necessarily taking in air and letting out the bad air. Prana is taking, anything that you take in is prana. Now we take in not only air, but we take in sights through our eyes, we take in food through our mouth, we take in sounds through our ears, we take in feelings and touch from our skin. So anything that you take in, even ideas in our mind we take in, all these things are prana. Whatever that we take in are prana. And apana is not only just the air that is going out, but anything that you put out, meaning our responses to whatever that we take in are our responses. That's called apana. So they control the prana and apana. Those are the 5th kind of people who do that.